I'd like to introduce you to Siddharth Hande. He is the CEO and founder of Kabadiwalla Connect. And I'm going to leave Sid to tell you all about Kabadiwalla Connect and what it does. But I just want to say first that the reason I'm super excited to have Sid here is because the work that he's doing is really, as Sid was saying, it's really highlighting the massive opportunity that exists for circular economy in developing countries. And yeah, the examples we've seen and heard about today have basically all come from Europe and the Western world. But that, of course, doesn't mean that we should ignore the huge potential for emerging economies to really contribute to the transition to a circular economy. And, you know, if we're going to achieve that on a global scale, it's really key. So Sid, welcome. Thanks very much for being here. Just to start with, can you summarize in a nutshell what Kabadiwalla Connect is?
Yeah. So Kabadiwalla Connect is a tech-driven, data-centric social enterprise that integrates the informal sector into the formal waste management system. So some context, in the developing world, I think there's an OECD study that says that 80% of work is informal. And when we think about informality, especially in waste management, we think about the waste picker, but actually there's this incredible decentralized supply chain of people incentivized working to recover material. Starts with a waste picker who picks up material on the ground. He sells it to a Kabadiwalla, a small level 1 aggregator. They're called lapaks in Indonesia. There's actually names for them all across the developing world. These guys aggregate more volume, take that material, sell it to a level 2 aggregator, somebody outside the city, and then finally that material, depending on the type of material, goes to a formal processor or an informal processor. In India, for example, PET, the final person is a formal processor, which then Adidas and all of these guys buy material to say, wow, it's ocean plastic, or that kind of a thing. But with other types of material, now we're working now on commercial pilots to see how we can get volume from this informal sector in a way that improves the livelihoods of and the lives of the most marginalized stakeholders. So that's essentially what we do. To make that kind of like make it relevant from a business perspective, what we offer is traceability of material movement in the informal supply chain, traceability and compliance. But we also do collection, and we want to get into processing because we believe the informal sector is really a critical supply chain that needs to be engaged if we're serious about what a circular economy can mean. Not in the developing world, but globally.
Yeah, great. So how did you get into that? What's your background?
So I'm a data scientist by training, so spatial data, so any data with a latitude and longitude I really like it. And I realized, my engagement with waste was in college when we used to organize beach cleanups. And we did it in a really cool way. It was a youth collective. We were all very bored with college. And we said, okay, why is there so much material coming onto the beach? And we started organizing cleanups. After a year and a half of working, we actually started asking questions. What are we doing? We're just moving waste from one place to another, from the beach to a landfill. And by the way, landfills in India and the developing world, you can't really call them landfills. They're like open dump sites. You know what I mean? So that really that got me interested because when we were doing these cleanups, we saw waste pickers coming in and picking up specific types of materials. And when I looked at the literature, most people only talk about waste pickers, and they are the most marginalized people in the supply chain. But I was really interested, what does the ecosystem look like? And then, so we started mapping the informal supply chain of small traders, large traders, middlemen, all of these kinds of people. And what we actually have, the data shows us that it is a robust supply chain, something that's built around the notion of decentralization and material movement. And I think that, honestly, the West has a lot to learn from how that supply chain evolved.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really key, isn't it? That what we're looking at really is quite a sophisticated system.
Yeah.
That is basically it's kind of invisible.
Yeah.
But so you're using technology really to leverage that system and kind of bring it to life.
Yeah, exactly. And like, it's interesting, like I've gone to a lot of different kinds of pitches talking about what we do, and we typically get roped into this, you're like an Uber for waste, you're connecting the local Kabadiwalla to the household. I said, well, not really. I mean, yeah, we are geo-enabled. hyperlocal is a focus, but we care about our vendors, you know. We want the lives of waste pickers to improve. We want the lives of the Kabadiwallas to improve, and we need a social contract. So it's really exciting now to see, working with companies like Danone and Veolia in Indonesia, who share that idea of efficiency, is not just trying to sell a big processing machine and for some short-term gain, but really, what does it mean, the circular economy? And I think that there's a lot of conversation here as well, where people in different panels just ask, what does it mean?
Yep.
You know what I mean? And for me, just my 2 cents, I think for me, the circular economy, if it's really to be relevant to solve the big problems, the big challenges we have, it's about eliminating supply chain inefficiency. And it's about removing this idea of externalization. I think that supply chains here have a huge problem with externalizing the cost. Let's move our waste. And the worst example is let's move our waste to Malaysia, and now that China is not taking it, let's move it somewhere else, right? But there's also a lot of subsidization that happens in the production centers which are in the developing world, so that products here are cheaper, and it's just completely unsustainable, and something needs to change.
Yeah, and I think like another key point really is, what Kabadiwalla Connect is doing is bringing a method that is kind of primed for where you're working, and we need to recognize that solutions for the Western world really don't work in India and other developing countries. And needs a different
and also
approach.
like we need to question, like, with data, what does developed and developing really mean? I think that there's so many signals around consumption that's coming from the US and from Europe and coming into the developing world that's absolutely unsustainable. And for me, I think that this data that we have is a kind of a good reminder about how things are built and how the idea of a decentralized supply chain and about how like eliminating externalities can really talk about what we mean when we say circular economy, which in my case is like a more equitable world, something that we can pass on to our children and things like this.
So can you just give just a couple of examples of like the specific projects that Kabadiwalla Connect are doing, just to make it a bit more real for people here?
Yeah, so the first is we've just launched a new video about a local collection service that we've just launched a pilot in my city, Chennai, India, which is a city in South India. There's a video on our website, kabadiwallaconnect.in, that you can see. Essentially, what we're doing is we're taking one small scrap shop and providing the tools such that the waste pickers that sell to that scrap shop don't have to go to the landfill or don't have to go to open dump sites to pick up material, but rather through an IoT-enabled bin that we put in apartments and households. Now, the beauty of this is all the collection is around, let's say, 5 square kilometers. And one of the things that we started talking when we started engaging the municipality was like, you know what? There's the infrastructure. There are Kabadiwalla shops all across the city that can do this. And if we do something like this, their means of collection is actually on tricycles. So we can eliminate, I think it was millions of dollars of diesel cost of collection, this last mile collection, which is really this big challenge that we have. And I think that that's so exciting. I mean, can you imagine if we had a take-back infrastructure that didn't require like petrol or diesel?
Exactly. Brilliant. So what would you say, since you started the Kabadiwalla Connect journey, what would you say your kind of key learning or a couple of your key learnings have been?
I think that, entrepreneurs have a lot to add. I think that there are like entrepreneurs who can communicate to audiences, and then there are entrepreneurs who want to put bread on their table for their family. And the Kabadiwallas, the Lapaks of the world do that, and they need to be recognized as a central part of the circular economy.
Awesome. Sid, thanks so much for coming. I think like the key message for me is that really being able to leverage that informal sector is really critical for moving the transition of circular economy forward globally, and something that we really hope to keep working with you on. So thanks very much.
Thank you.